Recently, during an EA Play event, the company revealed that a new Dead Space game is on the way, confirming rumours that had already been swirling for some time. Visually, all the publisher has to share at the moment is a teaser lasting just over 1 minute. But there are other slivers of information about the upcoming remake out there, if you know where to look. So let's pull apart everything we know about the Dead Space remake so far, much the same way you tear the limbs off a necromorph, really. Lovely image, that. Hey. So, first off, the obvious, that this game is a remake rather than a brand new story. It's being built from the ground up using the Frostbite engine, and it's coming to PC, PlayStation 5, and Xbox Series X and S. We don't have any kind of a release window as yet though, and in all honesty, it could be a while. As we've already found this year, a lot of release schedules are subject to change, more than usual, as studios adjust to different working conditions and everything is basically still a little bit in flux due to the pandemic. The game is being made by Motive, a Montreal-based studio founded in 2015 by Jade Redmond, when she joined EA from Ubisoft. Although Redmond left in 2018, the studio had continued working on a highly ambitious project, codenamed Gaia, for 6 years in total, until it was scrapped in February 2021. Motive had also assisted on Star Wars Battlefront, and it had shipped Star Wars Squadrons in 2020. Plus, it allegedly helped with Visceral Star Wars game, Project Ragtag, up until that was also cancelled in 2017. So it's maybe safe to say this Dead Space remake will be the studio's biggest project yet. But again, we may be waiting a little, well, a lot while longer, until we can play it. If you aren't familiar with the third-person abject terror of the original Dead Space, what's it all about? You play as Isaac Clarke, basically an everyman engineer who finds himself aboard a huge, sprawling starship, the USG Ishimura. But when he arrives, he finds something has gone horribly wrong. The ship's crew has been brutally slaughtered and infected by some alien scourge, and Isaac's girlfriend, Nicole, is still lost somewhere on board. Trapped and mostly alone, all Isaac can rely on are his tools and engineering skills as he attempts to uncover the mystery of what happened aboard the Ishimura. Facing the nightmarish creatures, called necromorphs, Isaac needs to defend himself. He soon finds that the only way to defeat a necromorph is to dismember them limb from limb. And would you know, as luck would have it, that's exactly what these engineering tools and their deadly laser cutters can be modified to do. The dismemberment mechanic was a key factor in what made the original game unique, horrifying, and ultimately brilliant. So it'll be fascinating to see how Motive's take reimagines and reinvigorates it. Interestingly though, the remake may also include features and content that was cut from the original game. In an interview with IGN, the game's creative director, Roman Campos Oriola, said that the original developer, Visceral Games, had to make big changes to its vision for Dead Space due to technical constraints at the time. That time, by the way, being way back in 2008. Now, Motive is able to utilize the original level design. The ideas that were in place before the OG studio's plans had to adapt and change during its development. We started with the original level design of the original Dead Space, Campos Oriola told IGN. What's funny is that you can see some of the iterations that were made prior to ship by the team. In the first chapter, you can see some corridors that they wanted to do first in a certain way, and then you can understand why they changed it for technical constraints. The team at Motive is keen to make things look and sound very, very scary, utilising the new generation of hardware's advancements in 3D audio and volumetric lighting to really crank up the atmosphere, with no loading screens to hamper the action. EA claims the game will take the level of horror and immersion to unprecedented heights through stunning visuals, audio, and controls, with an improved story, characters, game mechanics, and more. I always love to see a good and more, don't you? The team at Motive has big shoes to fill. Dead Space is widely regarded as one of the best horror games ever, and it was endorsed by some of the biggest names in survival horror from the start. For example, in a recent issue of Edge magazine, the director of the original Dead Space, Glenn Schofield, talked about what it was like having Resident Evil director Shinji Mikami brought in to test the game ahead of its 2008 release. I remember showing it to Mikami, Schofield said. EA was always having people come in from different game studios. We showed him one level and he bowed to me and he said, through an interpreter, "You've got something special." And I was so proud. I was like, wow, maybe we've got something great here. I don't know. You never know. You never know when you make any game what you've really got before it comes out. Given that Schofield's original pitch for Dead Space was allegedly, "I want to make Resident Evil in space," Mikami's glowing praise of the work in progress must have felt very nice indeed. Schofield has spoken too about how hard he had to work to even ship Dead Space. As a brand new IP in the horror genre, relatively niche for the time and publisher, it just wasn't EA's thing. It was only really by leveraging his position at the studio, vice president and general manager, that he was able to put together a small team and buy enough time to put together a promising demo. When they had those things in place and were already looking strong, John Riccitiello, EA's CEO, became a big advocate for the game, and production became more assured. Funnily enough, the recent commercial success of Resident Evil 4 helped quite a bit too. I think they still wondered how they were going to sell it because they were used to licensed games. But they gave us some money and we were able to finally get the game off the ground, Schofield said. Of course, EA was always hell-bent on chasing the commercial success of the original Dead Space, so when Dead Space 2 didn't sell as well, the publisher followed marketing trends instead of the development team's instincts for a third outing, in which it crowbarred in microtransactions and a cooperative multiplayer that seriously undermined the horror atmosphere. Dead Space 3 sold even less than 2, and EA closed the Visceral studio a few years later. Schofield recently tweeted that directing the original Dead Space was one of the highlights of his career, and that he was excited to see what Motive does with the remake. Thankfully, Schofield hasn't given up his love of horror though, as he's currently working on the Callisto Protocol, a sort of spiritual successor to Dead Space that's set in, of all places, the PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds universe, though several centuries in the future. It's coming to PC, PS5 and Xbox Series X and S next year, and for the record, looks extremely similar to Dead Space. Diegetic health bar and everything, and therefore looks genuinely terrifying. Incidentally, there's a little Easter egg referencing Glenn Schofield in the new Dead Space teaser, by the way. It was in the original game too, to be fair, but the brand of tools Isaac uses, that you can just make out in the top left-hand corner here, is named after the man himself. So, his legacy carries on. If there's one thing to be thankful for, EA has apparently learned from the frankly awful inclusion of microtransactions in Dead Space 3, because the remake will have none. It's also interesting to note that the developers at Motive are looking for ways they can incorporate the lore of later Dead Space games more seamlessly into their vision for the remake, potentially referencing and seeding the events yet to come. For us, the foundation is the Dead Space 1 story, so by default, that's what is canon. But then there are some improvements that we want to make to that story, Campos Oriola has said in interviews. And not necessarily improvements because those things were not really working in the original, more improvements because of what came after. And we're like, oh man, that's interesting if we could reference that or if we could make a link to that. The team is also keeping in mind the potential for the remake to introduce a whole generation of new fans to the original Dead Space. They're also wisely using the remake as an opportunity to include accessibility options that were not available the first time around, making the game playable for a much wider audience. Something that is also really important for us that was not there 12 years ago is all those options or different ways to play the game if you need them. All those elements of accessibility will definitely be something important for us in terms of opening the Dead Space experience to a broader set of people that didn't necessarily have the opportunity or could play the game when it came out, Campos Oriola told IGN. What I really hope is that Dead Space will continue to take its cues from Resident Evil, and how Capcom handled its recent remakes. The developer deliberately toyed with the expectations of its original fans, tweaking set-piece scares ever so slightly so as to keep things fresh and to keep players guessing. It was a very smart way of preserving the atmosphere of the original games perfectly, while still getting creative with the story, and meaning the people who played the original games didn't necessarily know what was going to happen any more than new players did. Anyhow, we still have a long way to go before we see this remake in action. So how about, in the meantime, you share your favourite moments from the Dead Space series in the comments below. Maybe we can put them all together in video form and be terrified by them together. Sounds like fun, eh? In the meantime, keep your arms and legs dutifully attached and enjoy another video on us. There should be a lovely selection on screen now. Thanks for watching. Bye!